The noises that Tuesday morning are burned into my memory. First came the confident growl of an engine far too big for suburban streets. Then the recognizable crunch of my poor petunias being flattened, followed by something entirely Verona. Wet, metallic shunk, like stabbing a fork through aluminum foil underwater. Then came the chorus of air hissing out of 4 very costly tires at once. From my living room window, I watched Diane Harrington's Pearl White Escalade lean sideways like a ship taking on water before settling at a crooked angle across what used to be my beloved rose garden. My name is Robert Dalton, and I moved to Pine Ridge Estates 3 years ago in search of peace and quiet after retiring from 3 decades in corporate accounting. The house was nothing spectacular. A modest split level with outdated kitchen cupboards and carpet long past its prime. But it had one feature I adored: a front garden, stretching from my porch to the sidewalk. Perfect for the new pastime I'd taken up in retirement, growing prize-winning flowers. What I hadn't expected was Diane Harrington, HOA president. Self-anointed neighborhood enforcer, a woman who treated community bylaws with the reverence others give to Holy Scripture. She lived 3 houses down in a colonial with a lawn so perfectly trimmed it might as well have been cut with manicure scissors. She drove her Escalade as though she owned not just her property but every inch of pavement and grass in a 5-block radius. The first time she crossed my garden, I assumed it was an accident. Perhaps she swerved to miss a squirrel or dropped her phone. I replanted my crushed daffodils without complaint, thinking it was a one-time mishap. The second time, exactly. 1 week later, I realized she was simply using my yard as a shortcut to avoid the speed bump the HOA had installed in front of her own driveway. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who had pushed for those speed bumps was now destroying private property to bypass them. By the 3rd time, I'd had enough. I marched to her door with photos of my ruined flower beds and the tire tracks leading directly from her driveway across my lawn. She answered dressed in what I could only describe as business casual for someone whose sole business was making life miserable for others. Her reply came with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, according to subsection 12.4 of the HOA guidelines. My beds extended 3 inches beyond the approved landscaping boundary and therefore obstructed emergency vehicle access. When I pointed out no emergency responder would need to plow through my petunias, she shrugged and suggested I read the bylaws more carefully. The next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my door: $50 for obstructive botanical arrangements. I paid, assuming that would be the end of it. Instead, it emboldened her. The following week brought another drive-through and another fine. $1.75 this time for aggressive horticultural practices. When I asked what that meant, she pointed to my sunflowers, claiming they were leaning menacingly toward the street. The week after, she drove straight through my garden while I was standing in it watering roses, waving from behind her tinted glass as 6 weeks of cultivation were crushed under her all-terrain tires. That's when I began documenting everything. I installed a Ring doorbell and 2 more cameras with perfect views of my yard. The footage was both infuriating and oddly satisfying. There she was. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 8:15, cutting diagonally across my lawn to shave 30 seconds off her trip to the community center for HOA meetings. One especially memorable clip showed her sipping a venti caramel macchiato while plowing through my herb garden, even adjusting her rearview mirror mid-destruction.
I brought the evidence to the police.
Sure, I finally had her nailed. The officer seemed sympathetic, but ultimately shrugged. Without significant property damage, it was a civil matter. The plants weren't valuable enough for criminal mischief, and she could claim confusion over property lines. He suggested I take it to the HOA board, which made me laugh until I nearly cried. Complaining about Diane to the HOA was like asking a fox to investigate missing hens. The board was packed with her book club friends, all of whom seemed to think rules were for other people. That night, I researched my options. Motion-activated sprinklers? She'd fine me for water waste? Bollards? Prohibited as defensive structures. Then I found something in a forum for people with similar issues: heavy-duty tire deflation devices disguised as garden art, perfectly legal. Shaped like oversized metal flowers. designed to bear up to 300 pounds when flat but puncture any tire rolling over at an angle. The site said they were popular in high-traffic garden areas where vehicle intrusion is a concern. I ordered 6 for nearly $300 with overnight shipping. When they arrived, I admired the craftsmanship, 8-inch metal sunflowers with petals hiding razor-sharp spikes. The instructions advised placing them just below the soil for maximum aesthetic integration. That evening, I buried them along Diane's usual route, covering them with just enough mulch to be invisible. To passers-by, my garden looked unchanged, but now it had teeth. I didn't wait long. That Tuesday, coffee in hand, I heard Diane's Escalade and stood ready with my phone, though the cameras had it covered. She swung into my yard with her usual disregard, left hand on her phone, right on the wheel. The first spike hit her front left tire, then the right, followed by the rear. A second later, the sound was glorious for sharp pops, like champagne corks in celebration. The SUV lurched, leaning to one side as all 4 tires deflated. I watched her face cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance in 10 seconds. Flat. She got out, surveyed the damage, then called a tow truck. The driver was Gary Novak, a neighbor she'd fined repeatedly for late recycling bin retrieval. His grin was wide enough for me to see from my window as he told her 4 new SUV tires would run about $1,200 plus towing. While she absorbed that, a police cruiser arrived. For a moment, my heart skipped. I feared she'd somehow convinced them to arrest me, but the officer strode right past and went to her. Turns out, when I'd submitted my footage, they'd noticed something I'd missed. She wasn't just cutting through my yard. She'd crossed the Wilsons' lawn, the Patel's rock garden, even clipped Mr. Baker's vegetable plot. That pattern of trespassing brought 3 citations. Gary hooked up her crippled Escalade. The real reward came 2 days later at an emergency HOA meeting. Someone had tipped off a local blogger, and half the neighborhood came to watch. During public comments, residents lined up with their own Diane horror stories. She'd been weaponizing the HOA for years. Then the treasurer, free from her grip, revealed several $1,000s of HOA funds had been spent on executive development seminars that were actually spa weekends in Scottsdale. The removal vote was unanimous, even her friends siding against her. When faced with proof of embezzlement, the DA launched an investigation. The last time I saw her, she was packing boxes into a rental car, her Escalade still in the shop, repairs delayed by legal bills. She shot me a glare as I watered my restored garden, now flourishing and car-free. I waved, then turned back to my roses. 6 months later, her trial ended with a guilty verdict for stealing $8,700 in HOA funds. She got 2 years in prison, though she'd serve less with good behavior. At sentencing, she wore a plain gray suit instead of her usual designer attire and actually cried as she was led away in cuffs.